Very good morning to all of you. Good morning, Bhante. Welcome to Dharma College and the program that we've been doing over the last few months, of course, on Abhidharma and Mind. And we are so privileged and honored to have Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi give us the teachings on Abhidharma based on the book, A Comprehensive Manual of Abhidharma. So this is a series of teachings, and today we will be starting from 10 to 12. We're over here in Berkeley, California, where it's just a little bit past 10 o'clock, and we'll go till noon. The way we've been doing this program is that Bhante will be teaching us for about an hour and a half. And then towards the end of the program, we will have time to take questions. And we would ask if you could put your questions in the chat box. And Richard, who's aside me, will be collecting those questions and helping to share them with Bhante. So today we are going to be focusing on chapter 4, the process of consciousness. And just to remind you that we'll be returning back after noon from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So we'll take a break for between 12 and 2, and then return back from 2 to 4. And then we will begin again next month in September during Labor Day weekend. But we'll talk more about that in our second session today. So I warmly welcome Bhante to begin this teaching today, and welcoming all of you to be part of this program. Thank you.
Okay, so I thank Wang Mo and Richard and Dharma College for inviting me to conduct this series on the Abhidharma. We started last January. Well, it seems like about 10 years ago. January 2021, with the first 2 chapters in the Comprehensive Manual of Abhidharma. Then I continued last month with chapter 3, which deals with a variety of miscellaneous topics in the understanding of Cheetahs, states of consciousness, and mental factors. And now we come to chapter 4. And to make it easy for all of us, what I'm going to do now is to share my screen so that we could follow the text together. And let's go back to the beginning of this chapter. Okay, so basically I will point out like the highlights, the key points in each section. And probably rather than save all of the questions to the end, when we come to the end of a particular section where I find it's convenient stopping point to take questions, then we'll take some questions, but we won't continue indefinitely with the questions, because sometimes a topic will bring up an endless string of questions and then we don't get to the rest of the chapter. But when I feel we have to continue, then I'll break off taking the questions and then we return to the text. Okay, so the name of this chapter is called Viti Sangaha Vibhaga. So Vibhaga means like analysis, and Sangaha is collecting together or compendium. But the key word here is Viti. The word Viti originally meant in the Indian languages an avenue. In fact, if there are any Sri Sinhalese people on this class now, you probably know the word Vidya. Like when I was in Sri Lanka, out in this main street in Kandy was the DS Senanayaka Vidya. So I think vidya is probably the Sinhalese word corresponding to viti in Pali. I think it's the same in Sanskrit. And the word viti, originally meaning avenue or street, comes to mean, in the Abhidharma terminology, a process. And specifically, this is called a Cheetah viti, which means the process of consciousness, the process governing the succession or sequence of cheetahs, of individual acts of consciousness. Since if you remember from our earlier classes, we explained that even though it seems in our ordinary experience, it seems it's the same consciousness going on from day to day, from hour to hour, from minute to minute. But according to the Abhidharma way of looking at the mind is made up of a sequence or succession of distinct, discrete moments of consciousness, each flashing into being, passing away, dissolving, followed by the next moment of consciousness. So it seems to be a continuing entity, a continuous entity, is actually a rapid succession of flashes of consciousness, which occur in such rapid succession that they create the appearance of continuity. And so what's done in the Abhidharma is to look into the factors, the cheetahs that make up these sequences of cognition. And that sequence, the active sequence, is called Cheetah viti, which we translate here, cognitive process. Okay, now the author of the Abhidharma Sangha says, I shall briefly explain in due order the occurrence of consciousness, both at rebirth linking and during the course of existence, according to the planes and individuals, and so forth. And so in this chapter, so that's what he's going to deal with in the next two chapters, chapter 4 and chapter 5. And in this chapter, he'll be dealing with the occurrence of consciousness in the cognitive process. This is the Cheetah viti. I think maybe is this better, the size? Yeah, I think this is probably a better size. Okay, so this is the Cheetah viti, the cognitive process. And then in the next chapter, chapter 5, he'll deal with the occurrence of the consciousness outside the cognitive process. And what lies outside the cognitive process is the occurrence of the consciousness on the occasions of rebirth, the moment of death, and then during the course of life, in that underlying substratum consciousness, which is called the bhavanga. Okay, now to explain the cognitive process, there are 6 groups of 6 items that are critical to understanding the cognitive process. Some of these we had in the chapter 3. So we have 6 bases. The word for base in Pali, here it is vatu. The base is the physical support for the occurrence of the cheetahs. And so the 6 bases are eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, which are the bases respectively for eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness and body consciousness. And then there's the mano vijnana, the mind consciousness. And according to the Abhidharma, the base, the physical support from mind consciousness is called the hadayavatu, which means the heart base, which is not the physical heart itself, the organ that's beating, but it's a subtle kind of matter in the region of the heart. So those are the 6 bases. These 6 doors, the first 5 doors are the same in name as the 6 bases. The door is the channel through which cognitive processes arise. And so we have the eye door, ear door, nose, tongue, body door. But then the 6th door is not the heart base. The mind door is the Bhavanga Chitta itself. That is the channel through which states of mind consciousness arise. States of consciousness that do not arise through the physical sense doors. Then we have the 6 objects. The 6 objects are visible forms, sounds, odors, tastes, tactile objects, and then purely mental objects. Then we have the 6 types of consciousness named after the 6 doors: eye consciousness, nose consciousness, ear consciousness, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. And then we have the 6 kinds of processes and the 6-fold presentation of objects. And that's what is going to be explained at length in what follows. Okay, so we have the 6 types of consciousness that I already mentioned. So now we're going to come to the 6 cognitive processes. And these are the processes occurring through the eye door, ear door, nose door, tongue door, body door, or through the mind door. Okay, then this section, it was just taken from the commentaries. This just lays out the essential factors, the essential conditions for each of these kinds of processes. So just take one example for the eye door process. You need the sensitive matter of the eye. That is the door through which the process takes place. Then you need the object. In this case, it's a visible object. Then you need the attention to the object, the turning of the mind to the object, and then a special distinct supporting condition for an eye door process is light. Then just to take another example, the ear door process, you need the sensitive matter of the ear, the object is sound, you need attention, and then the special condition is space through which the vibrations of the air are conveyed through space until they strike against the eardrum, creating the sound. Yeah, we don't have to go in detail through the others. But just for the mind door process, okay, we have the base is the heart base for a mind door process. The object will be the Dhamma Ramana, a mental object. There'll be the act of attention, and then the special condition will be the Bhavanga, which functions as the door for the mind door process. And you could see that though there are 6 types of cognitive process, but we can divide these into 2 broad groups. The 5-door processes, that is the 5 types of sensory consciousness, basically their process is pretty much all the same. The only thing that differs is the sense faculty through which the type of consciousness occurs and the object, but everything else in the process will be the same. But the mind door process is somewhat different, and this comprises all the processes that are occurring exclusively at the mind door. It seems we're getting somebody is not muted, so we're getting some noise. Whoever is not muted, please, should mute your microphone. That's it. Okay, so I say here that the first 5 processes all follow a pretty uniform pattern, except the only difference is in the sense faculty and the object, while the 6th includes various types of processes, and pretty much the only thing that unifies them is that they occur independently of the physical sense doors. Okay, now we're coming to a major distinction, sort of the major topic in this part of the chapter, that is the 6-fold presentation of objects. And here we start to meet some important distinctions. At the 5 physical sense doors, the presentation of the object is distinguished as 4-fold, either very great or very powerful, moderately great or moderately powerful, then slight and very slight. And then at the mind door, the distinction between the presentation of objects is between the clear presentation and the unclear or obscure presentation. And then here we say that the terms great object and slight object and so forth, this doesn't indicate the size of the object, but the number of the cheetahs that occur in the process from the moment the object enters the range of the sense door until the presentation of the object to consciousness ceases. Okay, so now we're going to take the 5 sense door process. So it's in the sense door process, at the 5 sense doors, that we have the 4-fold distinction. And let's see how that distinction comes about. And the author begins with the very great object. Okay, so let's see how we draw these distinctions. And to give the explanation, he starts off by pointing out that one mind moment, even though the mind moments occur very, very quickly, just a micro fraction of a second, but even then, one mind moment consists of 3 sub-moments, which are the moment of arising. Then for one brief moment, the cheetah, the mind, is present. And then immediately after being present, it vanishes, the moment of dissolution or destruction. But material phenomena are also in a rapid process of change, never remaining static. But the duration of material phenomena is longer, much longer than the duration of mental phenomena. Material phenomena, according to this Abhidharma system, endure for 17 mind moments. So even though the material phenomena are just arising and vanishing, but within the arising and vanishing of a material phenomena, 17 mind moments arise and pass away. But now the sense object, which is a material phenomena, it has to enter into the range of a physical sense door at the stage of presence after one or several mind moments have passed. At the moment of arising, the material phenomena is too weak to make an impact on the sense door. So it's when the sense object reaches the stage of presence that it can enter the avenue of the sense of the sense door. And so, continuing, he says, taking the case of visual perception. So we have the visible form as object. It passes one mind moment, that is, the visible form and a mind moment arise together. And that mind moment will be a moment of the Bhavanga consciousness. But at the moment that the visible form arises, it can't enter the range of the sense faculty. So one mind moment, one moment of Bhavanga passes, then the visible form enters the range of the eye. It makes an impact on the eye. And when it does so, then the Bhavanga, the life continuum, is said metaphorically to vibrate for 2 mind moments. That is, a little disturbance takes place in the Bhavanga. Maybe to give an analogy to make it this clear, suppose you have like a stream of water flowing by, and it's very smooth. It's just like no wind is blowing, no waves or ripples. The water is just flowing, the surface as smooth as a mirror. And then you just take a little pebble and you throw that little pebble into the stream, and it just causes some ripples in the stream of water. So that is like when the object enters the range of the eye, then the life continuum vibrates for 2 moments. And the second mind moment, the Bhavanga stops. The stream of the Bhavanga gets cut off because now the cognitive process is going to begin. Remember, the Bhavanga is like that passive, quiescent flow beneath the surface. And now the first active moment of consciousness to arise is called the 5-door inverting consciousness, the Panchadwara Vajana. This arises and ceases, turning to that visible form as its object. In the past, I gave a simile for the 5-door inverting consciousness. I'll just mention that simile again. It's like you're in a hall, like maybe a meditation hall or a Dharma hall, in which there are 5 doors, and the doors are closed, and you're in the middle, and somebody comes and knocks on one of the doors. When you hear the knock, then you turn to the door where you hear the knock coming from in order to let the visitor come into the hall. So that's the job of the five-door inverting consciousness, to turn to the particular sense door where the object is striking. If it's a sound, the five-door inverting consciousness will turn to the sound through the ear. If it's, say, a taste, you're eating something, you get a taste, the five-door inverting consciousness will turn to the taste through the tongue. But in this case, we're taking a visible object. So the five-door inverting consciousness turns to the object, the visible form. Then there arises next the eye consciousness, which has the function only of seeing the form. It's the barest, most rudimentary act of seeing. The eye consciousness don't know nothing. It doesn't identify the object at all, but it just sort of, like a camera taking a picture, it just takes in the picture of the form that's appearing. Then it's followed by the next cheetah, the next act of consciousness receives the impression of the object. So this is called the receiving consciousness that receives the object. The next cheetah momentarily investigates the object. Then there occurs a cheetah called the determining consciousness that in the most simplest, basic way determines what the object is. It doesn't yet identify the object conceptually with labels, concepts, designations, but I have to admit, I can't really understand how it takes place, but it's the simplest, most basic act of determining the object. Now, if you remember from the previous classes, the eye consciousness, receiving consciousness, and investigating consciousness, all of these are karma resultant cheetahs. These are results of past karma. And they could be the result of a wholesome karma or of unwholesome karma. And the determining consciousness, this one is what is called a functional cheetah. It just performs the bare function. Okay, what follows next after the determining consciousness is the phase called Javana, which is the most important phase in the cognitive process, because it's in this phase that a response occurs to the object. It's in the Javana phase that fresh karma is created. All of these cheetahs, the eye conscious, the five-door inverting, eye consciousness, and so forth, are just occurring more or less automatically. But it's in the Javana phase that volition becomes an active factor. And the text says, in the case of a sense object, 29 cheetahs can take on that role of Javana. We'll see what they are as we go along. For now, we just want to go through the stages. And normally, the Javana phase consists of 7 cheetahs, which will all be of the same type. It's the same type of cheetah performing the same function of Javana, but that cheetah repeats 7 times. And now in the case of a very great object, like in this case that's being described here, after the Javana, there'll be 2 Cheetahs, which are called, they're translated as registration Cheetahs. The Pali term is Tad Aramana, which means literally taking that object. That is, they take the same object as the Javana Cheetah. So they occur 2 times, the same type of cheetah performing the function of registration. And this cheetah is a resultant cheetah. And then after the registration phase, then the cognitive process comes to an end and the bhavanga, the flow of the bhavanga, resumes. It'll occur, the bhavanga will occur again in a succession, and then another cognitive process will occur. So these 2 types of series of cheetahs, cognitive process and the bhavanga, alternate in very rapid succession. So we don't even, because they're alternating so rapidly, we don't notice the fall into the bhavanga. But we see the bhavanga most distinctly in deep dreamless sleep, when we're not aware of anything at all. When we wake up, then we can know that we were in the bhavanga. But in the course of waking life, again and again, even while I'm speaking, while you're listening, I'm going through processes of active consciousness, the Chitta-viti, cognitive processes, and then a quick fall into the bhavanga, then coming out again into active consciousness. To use an analogy that some computer people have told me, like while I'm looking at this computer screen, they tell me the screen is actually flashing on and off thousands of times a second. But when I'm looking at the screen, I don't see a blank screen, and then I see the text reappear. But it seems I'm just reading the words, following this, any one of the 29 sense-sphere javanas and so on. And it seems like the text is just stable in front of me. But if we could really slow it down, we would see the image is flashing on, blank, on, blank. Yeah, they say one picture is worth 1,000 words. So we have okay. Okay, so here is a diagram of the complete I-door process. This is the process with a very great object. Okay, this is the quiet subliminal flow of the bhavanga occurring here and going back further. Okay, now a visible form object arises. It arises, you see the 3 stars. The 3 stars in each little box represent the 3 phases for each cheetah of arising, stand presence, and vanishing. So when the form object arises, that corresponds to this arising moment of the bhavanga. Okay, then 2 more moments, the presence and vanishing of this past bhavanga go by. Then we have the bhavanga is now disturbed. So it vibrates for these 2 moments, 2 and 3. And with moment 3, the bhavanga stops. Then we have the 5-door inverting cheetah, turning to the form, then the moment of eye consciousness, seeing the form, receiving consciousness, taking in the form of the object, then the investigation and determining, then the 7 moments of bhavanga, the 7 moments of Javana, and then the 2 moments of registration. And then at the last sub-moment of registration, this is the vanishing moment of the registration chitta, the form object ceases. So this line here, this long red line, represents the duration of the visible form object. But within that period in which the visible form object is existing, 17 Cheetahs arise and vanish. And then after the registration Cheetah comes to an end, then the bhavanga resumes its flow until the next process occurs. Okay, so that is a full process where the object is called very great, the very great object. Okay, let's see if there's anything important in the commentary. Yeah, so it says here that in the case of material phenomena, the stage of presence is equal to 49 sub-moments of mental phenomena. That's because the mental phenomena, the Cheetah, lasts, we have 17 Cheetahs during the duration of the material phenomena. Each of those Cheetahs has 3 sub-moments: arising, presence, vanishing. So that would make 51. But there's for the material phenomena, the moment it arises and the moment it vanishes. So we take those 2 away. So the material phenomena will remain in the stage of presence for 49 sub-moments of the mental phenomena. Okay, so this is the process now for the very great Cheetah. And the 29 Javanas, let us see what they are. Remember, these are the karmic, normally the karmically active types of Cheetah. So they could be unwholesome Cheetahs, and we have 12 unwholesome Cheetahs. Let me refresh my memory. 8 are rooted in greed, 2 rooted in hatred, and then 2 without greed or hatred, but with strong delusion, the doubting Cheetah and the restless Cheetah. Okay, then we have 8 wholesome Cheetahs, sense sphere wholesome Cheetahs, and their corresponding functional types in the case of the Arhat. You'll find these in chapter 1. And if it's not, and in the case of the Arhat, you might have that rather strange smile-producing Cheetah. And only one of those Cheetahs, whatever arises, will run for all 7 occasions of the Javana process. Okay, and this is a process with a very great object. And now to help us, the commentaries have developed or given a nice little simile. We could go through the simile since it might give us something, kind of visual model with which to understand the cognitive process. Okay, so we have here the case where there's a man with his head covered has gone to sleep at the foot of a mango tree. And while he's sleeping, then a mango drops off from the stalk and it falls down. And as it falls, it grazes his ear and hits the ground. And then the man is awakened by the sound. He opens his eyes and he looks. Then he stretches out his hand, takes the mango fruit, squeezes it and smells it. Then he eats the mango. And when he's swallowing it, he appreciates its taste. And then he goes back to sleep. Okay, so the time when the man is sleeping underneath the mango tree, that is like the time when the bhavanga is going by. Okay, then the moment when the mango falls from the stalk and grazes his ear, this is like the instant when the object strikes one of the sense organs, in this case, the eye. Okay, the time when the man is awakened by the sound, that's like the time when the moment when the five-door inverting consciousness turns to the object. Then the man opening his eyes and looking, that's like the eye consciousness seeing the object. The man stretching out his hand to grab the mango, that's like the receiving consciousness. The time of squeezing the fruit, I guess, to see whether it's ripe or not, that's like the investigating consciousness, investigating the object. And the time of smelling the mango, that's like the determining consciousness. Then the time of eating the mango is like the Javana, experiencing the flavor of the object. And then afterwards, just appreciating the taste after you've swallowed the fruit, that is like the registration consciousness, sort of registering the impression of the object that has appeared in the Juvenile Phase. Then the man goes back to sleep. That is like the return to the bhavanga. And from the philosophical point of view, what is important about this cognitive process is that it shows how the mind can function without any self or subject behind it as a kind of lasting, enduring experiencer or inner controller, some kind of Atman or self behind the process, but rather experience consists just of this succession of momentary cheetahs, each one exercising its function and then giving way to the next cheetah. Okay, so all of this that's been described here is the process with a very great object or a prominent object in which the impact of the object is strong enough to generate or to bring forth the two moments of registration consciousness. Okay, but now we come to the next case. This is the case of what is called the great object. But though it's called great, but this is weaker than the very great object. Okay, so this is the case where the object enters the range of the sense after it has passed a few moments. And so it is unable to survive in long enough to see the arising of the registration mind moments. So in this case, the process will go on until the end of the Javana phase. And after the seventh Javana, then the bhavanga will return, and there will be no occurrence of the registration cheetahs. Okay, so now the explanatory guide explains so in this kind of cognitive process, after the object has arisen for, oops, so after the object has arisen, 2 or 3 past Bhavanga Cheetahs pass before the object causes the Bhavanga to vibrate. And since the object and the sense door can only endure for 17 mind moments, this process does not leave any room for the registration Cheetahs to arise. But the registration cannot occur even when there are 2 past Bhavangas, since registration occurs either for 2 mind moments or not at all. Let's just go back to the diagram. Okay, if, say, the visible form, maybe even, if the visible form appears here after 2 Cheetahs have gone by, then we have so we have 2 past Bhavangas here. Then we have the vibrational Bhavanga here, the arrest Bhavanga here, then 5-door adverting, eye consciousness is here, investigating, wait. Okay, 2 Bhavangas have gone by, vibrational Bhavanga here, arrest Bhavanga here, 5-door adverting here, eye consciousness here, receiving, investigating, determining. Then there are 7 moments of Javana, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so the Javana phase goes up through number 16 here, but registration has to occur as either a double header or not at all. And so in this case, the process of the cognitive process will come to an end after the Javana phase with no registration. And if the object enters at this phase here, then all of these are past Bhavangas. Then we have the vibrational Bhavanga here, the stopping here, then 5-door adverting, eye consciousness, and so on. Then there's no room at all for registration. So in these cases, the process comes to an end with the end of the Javana phase, and then it's followed immediately by the Bhavanga and no registration consciousness. Then in the case of the slight object, okay, the slight object, this is when the visible form object enters the avenue or the range of the sense faculty and makes its impact after 4 to 9 Bhavangas have gone by. In that case, no Javanas, there's no room for the Javana phase to occur at all. but rather the determining chitta will occur 2 or 3 times, and then the cognitive process falls back into the bhavanga. So this process ends with the determining phase. And then in the 4th type of process is with what is called the very slight object. And this is when the object enters the range of the sense faculty just when the object is very close to the time of ceasing. And so it's unable to survive even until the arising of the determining consciousness. In this case, there'll merely be some vibration in the life continuum, but no occurrence of the cognitive process at all. And we have these different variations indicated in this table here. Okay, we don't have to go through all of them. We already went through the very great object, and then I showed the example with the great object, where several moments of the bhavanga go by before the cognitive process begins. Here we have, in this case, 4 moments of bhavanga go by, indicated by the P, the past bhavanga, before the vibration takes place and the process starts. In that case, the process ends with, in this case, 3 moments of determining consciousness. Then comes the bhavanga. When 1, 2, 3, when 5 moments of bhavanga go by, then there will be just yeah, 3 moments of determining. Yeah, so these are all the processes when there's room for the determining consciousness to arise, but no scope for the Javana phase to take place. With the very slight object, then there's just the vibration. You could see vibration of the bhavanga takes place, and then the fall into the bhavanga. There's no cognitive process at all takes place. Okay, so those are the processes that take place in the 5 sense doors. Now we're going to look at the process that takes place in the mind door. And in the mind door, the object is distinguished either as clear or as obscure. So 2 possibilities are mentioned. Okay, when a clear object enters into the mind door, then there takes place the vibration of the life continuum. And then it's followed by a chitta called the mind door inverting consciousness. This is a chitta that turns to the object appearing at the mind door. And that is followed by the javanas. And then at the end of the javana phase, then the registration chittas occur. And then comes the return to the bhavanga, to the life continuum. So here we have, with the clear object, we have the registration chittas occur. In the case when the object is obscure, then there is, the process ends at the javana phase. and there's no arising of the registration phase, of the registration cheetahs. Okay, let's look at some of the explanation that's important here. Okay, so first, what is called a mind door process? This is a process that occurs exclusively through the mind door without any admixture of the sense doors. And so this is sometimes called a bare mind door process. But what has to be said, an important qualification has to be mentioned, and that is that a bare mind door process can take as its object an object apprehended through the senses. But not at the same time that that object is actually appearing to the senses. For example, I look at this computer screen and I see a little patch of red. So when I'm actually seeing the red, that would be a sense door process occurring, or an eye door process. But when I'm distinguishing the object as red, conceptualizing it as red, or when I close my eyes and I remember seeing a red patch on the screen, all of that will be occurring as a mind door process. And the mind door process is very varied in nature. So it's distinguished into what is called the limited mind door process, which pertains to the sense sphere. And then the mind door process also occurs in the stages of meditative absorption, either in the jhanas or other state types of samadhi, and also in the supramundane attainments, that is with the attainment of the path and fruition. So when one is in meditative absorption in a jhana, or the formless attainment, like the base of infinite space, that is a mind door process. And when one attains, say, the path and fruit of stream entry, that also is a mind door process. It's not occurring through the physical sense doors. Okay, now the sense sphere mind door process is itself divided into two types. There is a type that occurs subsequent to, following up on a five-door process. Again, it takes the object of the sense door as its own object, but it's a different type of process. And then we have a mind door process, which is completely independent, not taking a physical sense object at all. Okay, so let's look at these two types. Okay, so when one of the five sense doors has been struck by a sense object, so first the corresponding sense door process occurs, taking that sense object as its own object. Okay, then that sense object, which has stopped, the sense object itself has ceased, but the impression that it's made on the mind can come into range at the mind door and set off many sequences of mind door processes. And so the Burmese, the great 19th century Burmese monk, Lady Soyador, has enumerated various types of mind or processes that occur consequent to or subsequent to a 5-door process, taking as object the same object as the 5-door process. I think some of these terms are the inventions or creations of Lady Soyador himself. Okay, so first we have the bare I-door process. Then it will be followed by what is called a conformational mind or process. So this is a mind or process that reproduces the object. It takes the object of the sense door process and reproduces it in the mind door. Then there comes a process grasping the object as a whole, taking in the whole of the object. Then, in the case of a visible object, a process recognizing the color. Then a process grasping the entity. I don't really know the details of what some of these terms entail. I think this would be grasping the entity that is the basis for the color. Like here, I see a patch of red, and now I grasp that that red patch is this little rectangle with the command stop share. So grasping the entity, then a process that recognizes or identifies the entity, then a process that grasps the name, and process recognizing the name. So all of these are mind door processes that occur, they occur through the mind door, but they take as their object the visible form that had been the object, in this case, of the I door process. Yeah, here comes some explanation of those terms. We don't have to go into that detail here. Then the other type of mind door process is the independent mind door process. And this occurs when any of the 6 objects enters the range of cognition on its own, not as a consequence of an immediately preceding sense door process. So, okay, let's see, how can a visible form object enter the mind door on its own, not immediately following a sense door process? Okay, so let us say on my walk this morning after breakfast, I saw a little turkey crossing the road. So I have a memory image of the form of that turkey. And so I could reproduce in my mind's eye the visible form of the turkey. And yet that took place this morning, or actually yesterday morning. So it's not immediately following a sense door process occurring now. Let's say I could take a sound object as the object of a mind door process. Okay, before the lunch here at the monastery, somebody from the kitchen will hit the bell to send the signal that the lunch is ready, come to the dining hall. And so in my mind door, if I just think back, I can take as object of the mind door the sound of the bell, even though that took place a few hours ago, 3 hours ago. And I can remember Now, the smell of the incense that we burned at the puja this morning, or I can remember the taste of the piece of apple that I had for lunch 2 hours ago. Okay, so those are mind or processes that take physical sense objects as their object, but not immediately following the sense door process. But then there are many millions of types of objects that are purely mind door objects, made up of maybe various combinations of sensory objects, but not depending very much on sensory perception. Like even when I think, what is mind? Then I have some idea of what is mind? What does the word opinion mean? I have some understanding of that. All of these take place in mind or processes without dependence on the senses. Okay, so we have the distinction of the clear object and the obscure or unclear object. Okay, so with the clear object, yeah, this is just reviewing what I covered a little while ago. With the clear object, the object enters the range of the mind door. The bhavanga is disturbed and gets cut off. And then the mind door adverting consciousness turns to the object. Then there occurs 7 moments of Javana, 2 moments of registration, then the return to the bhavanga. With the obscure object, in this case, because the object is more obscure, the 2 moments of registration don't occur. There'll be a Javana phase, but no moments of registration. Perhaps these will be, by conjecture, would be processes of consciousness that take place. If there's no registration, then probably there's no clear, the recollection of what took place in the mind, in thought, would not take place very easily. But when there's registration, then it will become easier to remember at a later time what was taking place in the mind. Okay, then we have this table showing the 2 types of limited Javana process. So with the clear object, we have the bhavanga is flowing by. Then they will take place when the mind object appears or breaks through the bhavanga. There'll come the moment of vibration or disturbance. The bhavanga gets cut off. Then the mind door adverting, turning to the object at the mind door. 7 moments of Javana, 2 moments of registration, then return to the bhavanga. With the obscure object, we have the 7 moments of Javana, no occurrence of registration, then the return to the bhavanga. I think we'll do the process of absorption in the mind door. Then I'll take questions. Okay, now what is meant by absorption? The Pali word here is appana. And that is a broad term referring to the attainment of deep levels of samadhi, where the mind is completely absorbed in the object. That would be cases of the jhanas and the arupa, the formless or non-material meditative absorptions, and also the attainment of the process, the cognitive process of attaining the paths and the fruits, the four supramundane, world-transcending paths and fruits. Okay, so the text tells us first, in the occurrence of the javanas in absorption, there's no distinction of clear and obscure object. Why is there no distinction of clear and obscure object? Because you ain't going to attain absorption with an obscure object. In order for the mind to enter into deep samadhi, the object has to be very clear. If it's obscure, you just can't gain absorption. And strangely, it's a little puzzling to me. It says that there's no arising of registration consciousness. I don't quite know why, but certainly somebody who has obtained meditative absorption, like the jhana, will have a clear recollection, clear memory impression of that absorption experience. Maybe the reason is that because the impact of the absorption experience is so powerful that no special registration chitta is needed. It just occurs automatically. That's my own guess. Okay, now in the Javana phase, in the process of obtaining absorption, some interesting differences occur in the types of Cheetahs. I think the explanation will actually be clearer if we go to the explanatory guide rather than the text itself. Okay, so first the word absorption or appada is extended to all the higher meditative attainments of the fine material sphere, that is the jhanas, the immaterial sphere, that's the formless attainments like the base of infinite space and so on, and the supramundane plane, that is the attainment of the paths and fruits. So no distinction between clear and obscure, because the meditative attainments are only possible when the object is clear. Okay, now this is the process in attaining a jhana, a path, or the fruit. Okay, first, after the bhavanga is passed, there arises the mind door inverting. Okay, now in the Javana phase, we have a series of sense sphere javanas occur in quick succession, leading from the sense sphere plane of consciousness to the higher planes, to the fine material plane, the immaterial plane, or the supramundane level. And these sense sphere, the Cheetahs that occur, these sense sphere Cheetahs that occur in this preliminary phase, for the case of ordinary people, or everybody except for arhats, they will be any of the four wholesome sense sphere Cheetahs accompanied by knowledge. That's the important qualification. They have to be accompanied by knowledge, not the type that are dissociated from knowledge. In the case of the arhat, there'll be the four functional Cheetahs accompanied by knowledge. Again, the important point, accompanied by knowledge. Okay, so what are these preliminary Cheetahs? They're sense sphere Cheetahs accompanied by knowledge, and they're each one is a different cheetah with a different preliminary function. So we have 4 of these preliminary cheetahs. The first moment is called preparation. Again, it's just one flashing cheetah that flashes, and it's called preparation because it prepares the mind to enter the higher level of consciousness. The next one is called upachara, or access, because it's getting close to the attainment. So we have preparation, access. Then the next one is called conformity, because it conforms to the subsequent absorption. Don't ask me in detail exactly what that means, but it's sort of, maybe it's called conformity because it's getting really close to the absorption. So it's taking on the nature or the character of the absorption, but it's still pertaining to the sense sphere. And then the 4th moment is called change of lineage. In the case of the jhana attainment, it's called change of lineage because it overcomes the lineage or the heritage of sense sphere consciousness and is sort of serving as the bridge to the sublime jhanic consciousness. In the case of the path attainments, this moment is called change of lineage because it marks the transition from the stage of being a worldling to the stage of being an Aryan, a noble one. So this is the usual process, is with these preliminary, with 4 preliminary functions. The preliminary Javana is occurring 4 times. But if you really have sharp faculties, it's said keen faculties, then the preparatory, the moment of preparation doesn't have to occur. You don't need that moment because your faculties are sharp. So the moment of preparation is omitted and you go directly to the stage of access. Then you have just the 3 moments of access, conformity, and change of lineage. Okay, now, so these, let us take the person, the ordinary person, will go through these 4 preliminary cheetahs: preparation, conformity, preparation, access, conformity, change of lineage. Then immediately after change of lineage cheetah, then there will arise in the Javana phase, the first cheetah at the level of absorption. And this cheetah might be one of the 5 fine material sphere cheetahs. That is, if one has attained a jhana, say one is attaining the first jhana, then what will arise will be the first jhana cheetah. If one is attaining the second jhana, what arises is the second jhana cheetah. Similarly, 3rd jhana, 4th jhana, 5th jhana cheetah. If the meditator is going to the formless meditations, it might be the cheetah of the base of infinite space, the base of infinite consciousness, the base of nothingness, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. So that is one of the 5 fine material sphere Cheetahs, or any of the 4 immaterial sphere Cheetahs. But if the person has been developing insight, wisdom, with the aspiration to reach the paths and fruits, then what arises in that position is not a regular fine material sphere jhana or immaterial sphere Cheetah, but what arises will be a path or a fruit. And this is the way in the absorption process that, you see, in ordinary sensory sense sphere cognitive processes, the javanas are all of the same type. You have 7 javanas, all of the same type. But in the process for attaining absorption, the javana Cheetahs are of different types, even different planes. The first 4 Cheetahs are of the sense sphere plane, whereas what comes after that can be of the fine material plane, immaterial plane, or the supramundane level. And then after the absorption, then there comes the return to the bhavanga with no registration Cheetahs. Okay, so this is a diagram showing the absorption process. And this is for the initial attainment of jhana, somebody who's never attained jhana before. So we'll take the person with average faculties. So we have the bhavanga is going by, then comes the vibration of the bhavanga, the stopping of the bhavanga, the arrest, then mind door adverting, then the moment preparation, access, conformity, change of lineage, then one moment of jhana. With the first attainment of jhana, it lasts just for one mind moment. Then comes return to the bhavanga. For the person with sharp faculties, we drop the moment of preparation. We go from mind door adverting to access, conformity, change of lineage, one moment of jhana, then to the bhavanga. But as the meditator gets skilled in the practice of the jhanas, as we'll see, the jhana Cheetahs can be extended till they can occur continuously for hours without interruption. Okay, then comes attainment of path and fruit. So here it's a little different. Okay, if we take the average person, we have the bhavangas going by, then vibration of the bhavanga, arrest or stopping of the bhavanga, mind or adverting, preparation, access, change of lineage, conformity, change of lineage, then the one mind moment of the world transcending path consciousness, either path of stream entry, once returning, non-returning, arhatship, then 2 moments of the fruition. But if this practitioner has keen faculties, there's no moment of preparation and 3 moments of fruition. Yeah, this we don't need. I think I'll be ready for questions now, but can we take just a 5-minute break? And then at 2:30, please be back in your seat, then we can take the questions. Okay, are we ready to resume?
We are, Bante. We have quite a few questions.
Okay, okay.
May not be able to get to all the questions in this session, but
Yeah,
bring them over until the
yeah,
next.
yeah. What I can't get to in this session, we could put off till the second session. Okay, let us.
Richard, yeah.
Hello, Bhante. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, very well. Yeah.
So Bhanteji, the first question is this. Are the 6 bases, the 6 doors and the 6 objects, the dhatus? It's right at the beginning of the chapter.
Yeah. Okay, there are 18 dhatus. Let me just refresh my memory of the dhatus. Okay, so we have 6 sensory dhatus: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and then the mano dhatu. The mano dhatu is not the same as the heart base. The mano dhatu, this is in the Abhidharma way of explanation. The mano dhatu includes 3 cheetahs. Those 3 cheetahs are the 5-door inverting cheetah, the 5-door inverting cheetah, and the 2 types of receiving cheetah, wholesome resultant and unwholesome resultant. So that's the mano dhatu. And then the objects, visible object, the objects are the same. Could you repeat the question? So,
Well, yes, it's are the 6 bases, the 6 doors and the 6 objects, the 18 dhatus? Because it seems to be very similar, I guess.
similar, but there are differences. To see the 18 dhatus, I believe, let me just take a quick look, that they are mentioned in, or explained in chapter 7 of the manual. I think this has the analysis of the dhatus. Yeah, you find the dhatus in chapter 7. And it's section 37, chapter 7, section 37, with a diagram. So you get them there.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, why does the stream of Bhavanga get cut off? Is it because the cheetahs in the Bhavanga divert into the adverting and subsequent Javana cheetahs?
Yeah, you see, each cheetah has its own object and its own function. And so the Bhavanga cheetah has, the Bhavanga cheetah, yeah, there's some echoing coming. The Bhavanga cheetah has its own object, which we're going to come to next month.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
And it has a different function. Its function is not to actively cognize and sort of digest and assimilate the object, but its function is just to maintain the personal continuity through the whole course of life. And so when the active consciousnesses are taking place, they have different functions. And so for that reason, the Bhavanga gets cut off and replaced by the active cheetahs. And this differs somewhat from in the Yogacara system, one of the Mahayana schools. They develop a very detailed classification of types of consciousness, and they posit something called the alaya vijnana, the storehouse consciousness, which also it's in some respects similar to the Bhavanga in that it's a kind of subliminal flow of mental activity. But I believe in the Yogacara system, the alaya is not cut off when the other types of consciousness are functioning, but the alaya continues beneath the threshold of clear awareness, performing its function of storing all of the impressions of experience. But in the Theravada system, Abhidharma system, only 6 types of consciousness are posited. So there's no alaya vijnana. And so for that reason, as the 6th consciousness, the bhavanga is one mode of the 6th consciousness, and it can't be functioning simultaneously with eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, or with active mind consciousness.
Thank you, Bhante. That's very clear. Third one, can the karma resultant cheetahs of sense consciousness receiving and investigating be understood as klesha?
Klesha meaning defilement.
Yes.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because the klesha or kilesa, those are mental factors. And those mental factors which function as kilesas, the kilesas would be, for example, greed, hatred, delusion, conceit, wrong views, jealousy, envy, miserliness, and so forth. Those occur only in the Javana phase, and they occur only in the unwholesome types of cheetahs, the akusala cheetahs that are occurring in the Javana phase. So the receiving consciousness, investigating, determining consciousness, those are the receiving and investigating are resultant cheetahs. They result from past karma. And the determining consciousness is a functional cheetah. So they can't be associated with the kilesas or kleshas, because kleshas create karma, and these are either the results of karma or determining.
I see. Thank you, Bhante. Fourthly, how does the determining consciousness get converted into Javana? Is volition a cheetah? It seems to be a person.
Wait, the determining consciousness isn't converted into Javana, but the determining consciousness lasts just for one mind moment. It performs its function of determining the object in some way, then it's followed by the Javana. But what could you read the question again?
Yeah, I think the question is, what's the difference between the determining consciousness and the Javana? The Javana is volitional, right? So
yeah.
That seems to be a person that's suddenly appeared there making decisions or something.
Well, the point of the Abhidharma treatment of the cheetah is to put aside the notion of a person as being a kind of self or subject who is making decisions, choices, undertaking activities. These are all seen as functions of individual cheetahs. And the person in this way of thinking is, say, a designation for the conglomeration of these cheetahs and mental factors working together.
So the question there, I mean, that's why the question went on to say, I think, is volition a cheetah?
Volition is a mental factor. It's a chaitasika, and it's a chaitasika that occurs in every cheetah. So every cheetah has a chaitana, but the function of the chaitana differs in different cheetahs. So even in, say, eye consciousness, which just has the bare function of seeing a form, there's some chaitana there, but the chaitana is not actually functioning as volition the way we understand it. But it's said that its function in those type of cheetahs is simply to coordinate the other mental factors in the job of knowing the object. But in the Javana phase, the mental factor of chaitana then becomes volition in the proper sense, the way we understand the word in English. That is where chaitana is making choices, decisions, initiating action. And by initiating action, that is the factor responsible for creating karma.
Thank you, Bhante. And there's a related question. how can there be mere observation in the cognitive process of a great object, i.e. only an experiencer, if during the Javana phase there is appreciating the taste or view? Does this not suggest some subjective experience with a past experience, i.e. remembering or liking something?
I'm sorry, but yeah,
It's
I'll
kind of,
take the
I'm sorry,
question
it's quite a
again.
long question.
Yeah.
How can there be mere observation in the cognitive process, i.e. only an experiencer, if during the Javana phase there is appreciating of that object? Does this not suggest some subjective experience with remembering or liking something? I think it's the same sort of question.
Excuse me?
I think it's the same type of question. It's
Yeah. First, I don't think I said that in the Javana phase there's mere observation. Is that what the question said?
Yeah, that's the beginning. How can there be mere observation in the cognitive process of a great object, i.e. only an experiencer, if during the Javana phase there's appreciation?
I wouldn't say that in the Javana phase that there's only mere observation. I mean, some Javana phases could have some Javana phases can have the primary function of observation. Then other Javanas, probably later in the sequence of Javanas, will then have different functions in regard to the object, of making some decision with regard to the object, undertaking action, appreciation, disliking, pushing away, pursuing, many functions with occurring in the Javana phase. So observation is just one of them, one possibility.
Thank you, Bhante, because they go on to say, it seems that the consequent process described by Lady Sayadaw accounts for memory and appreciation. So is there no appreciation during the 17 mind moments of the great object?
I'd say probably when there's registration, those 2 moments of registration might perform what I would call a very primitive, very elementary type of appreciation. But what we consider appreciation in ordinary language, when, let's say, somebody gives me a gift and then I feel appreciation for that, that would be things that are occurring in rather complex Javana processes. Not that with these very simple, elementary individual Cheetahs.
Is there a section in the manual where the Javanas are explained in more detail, or is this it? Is there a section that talks about this?
I think in the second part, what we're going to be coming to, there's some more discussion of the Javanas, about the procedure of the Javanas. Yeah, we'll be coming to that in the second phase of today's class.
Thank you, Bhante. Could you clarify what the stage of presence refers to?
Yeah, this is just referring to the fact that each mind moment, as well as each material phenomena, goes through these 3 phases. And in the case of the Cheetah, it's extremely rapid. So they say that like millions of Cheetahs go by in the snap of a finger. But each of those individual Cheetahs, there's a sub-moment where it arises, and then a sub-moment when it vanishes. So those 2 should be clear enough. But there has to be a sub-moment between arising and vanishing where it just is. And that is what is called titi, which is translated here as presence, where literally titi is standing. So it arises, then it sort of flashes, then it vanishes. And that flash is the moment of presence.
Thank you, Bhante. Registration Cheetahs are resultant. Can they be, or are they usually the result of the karma arising from the 7 Javana Cheetahs immediately preceding them?
No. They will be resultants from earlier earlier comment, not from the immediately preceding javanas.
Could you expand on that, Bhante? That's a little strange. I don't understand that. Sorry.
We will be taking the registration in the afternoon session.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
fine.
so there'll be more said about it in the afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. If there's no registration, does that mean we're talking about subconscious or unconscious things that we never really become truly aware of, that are not focused in the front of the mind?
Yeah, I think if we're using the language of Western psychology, we might refer to those as subconscious or unconscious processes. But according to the Buddha's teaching, especially in the Abhidharma, there is consciousness even in those Javana phases when there's no registration, but probably because there's no registration. So these might be like the processes of mental activity that are going on thousands of times, even in any single minute of the day, but we're hardly aware of them. And maybe when we start to practice like meditation, and then we sit with the task of focusing on a single object, like to be mindful of the breath or the body in the sitting posture or any other simple object, then we start like seeing how so much activity is going on in the mind all the time. And we think that it's the meditation that is causing all of this activity in the mind. But actually what is taking place is that because we're developing mindfulness, so we're starting to light up, to illuminate things that are going on in the mind all the time previously that we were never aware of. So it seems to me that all of those activities that are starting to become exposed in the light of mindfulness through meditation, those are the activities that normally go on in these Javana processes that don't reach the stage of registration. But now we're lighting them up so that they sort of stand forth, clearly and distinctly.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. And then what does past bhavanga mean? There's a reference to the past bhavanga.
Yeah, okay, the bhavanga is when there's no cognitive process going on, then the bhavanga is always flowing by. Let me get that. So we have all of those moments of the bhavanga that are flowing by indicated here. It's called the stream of bhavanga. But we could indicate that this goes back. There's limits to the page, so they don't show all of the moments. Okay, but what is meant by past bhavanga? So this is when the object that's going to be the object for this cognitive process, when that object arises and enters the range of the sense faculty, before it makes its impact, just one moment of bhavanga goes by. During that rising moment of in this case, the visible form object, one moment of bhavanga goes by because in the arising moment of the form object, it's too weak to make an impact. So then it can only make its impact and cause some disturbance with the vibrational bhavanga after it reaches the stage of presence, the visible form object. So that the form object has arisen, but now this bhavanga goes, one more moment of bhavanga goes by, then the form object causes this disturbance in the stream.
Okay, thank you, Bhante.
If I could just go back, earlier I used the simile of throwing the pebble into the stream.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe the past bhavanga could be compared to the moment the little boy is on the bank of the stream. The moment before the little boy appears, the stream is just flowing by. Then the little boy comes and he picks up the pebble maybe the moment when he picks up the pebble, that's like the past Bhavanga. Or maybe the past Bhavanga is like he throws the pebble into the stream, but the pebble is flying through the air for a second or so before it drops and hits the stream. So that moment when the pebble is flying but hasn't hit the stream, that's like the past Bhavanga.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Bhante. At what stage can people in deep meditation see the 17 stages of the process of consciousness clearly or in slow motion?
Well, the general idea is that this analysis of mental functioning into the different stages was the sort of discovery of the Buddha through his supernormal power of mental observation. And what had been the general sort of consensus among meditators is that ordinary people, even with skill in meditation, can't see these individual mind moments. But in recent years, there's a meditation master in Myanmar or from Myanmar called Pa Auk Soyador, who's developed a system of meditation where it's said that the meditators who practice that, they are supposed to develop the 4 jhanas and then go on to develop the 4 formless meditations. And then they use the power of samadhi to examine the workings of the mind. And it's said that the meditators who go through that training are able to observe the individual cheetahs making up the cognitive process. That's what is said.
Thank you, Bhante. Now we've got slightly different questions. How does the sense door process work when they're multiple objects? For example, when you're seeing many things or hearing sounds at the same time. Does the eye door process work before the sound door process, or do they work simultaneously?
Yeah, what would be said from the Abhidharma perspective is that there cannot be cognitive processes operating through different sense modalities going on at the same time. So let's say let us say I'm sitting outside on a bench, and then a bird flies, a bird arrives on a stone somewhere in front of me and starts singing, and I'm looking at the bird and listening to the song of the bird. So it seems that while I'm looking at the bird, I'm simultaneously hearing the song of the bird. But what the Abhidhamma would say is that that is just illusory, because there are these 2 processes going on in very rapid, or actually multiple processes going on in rapid succession. So when there's an eye consciousness process, an eye door process by which I'm seeing the bird, simultaneously there can't be an ear door process hearing the song of the bird. But they go by so quickly, like hundreds of times in a second, that they get merged together in the way I experience it. And it seems to me that I am seeing the bird and hearing the song at the same time.
Thank you, Bhante. And
this is I have to confess, I have some trouble with that myself. It seems to me I'm seeing the bird and hearing it at the same time.
So
yeah, go on, please.
There's a related question to this, yeah. Which is simultaneous. I've lost my place. Forgive me. Is simultaneous awareness of awareness therefore not possible, according to the Abhidharma?
Say the question again.
Is simultaneous awareness of awareness
I see.
not possible, according to the Abhidharma?
Okay, so can you be aware of your awareness?
Yes.
You can, according to the Abhidharmic way of explanation, you can be aware of your awareness, well, let's say a cheetah can be aware of cheetah, but the cheetah that is the object is not the same cheetah that is aware. So let me just, okay, I'm just doing a little experiment here. I'm bringing to mind the street address of the house where I grew up. And now I'm trying to observe myself being aware of that street address. It seems, the way I experience this, that I'm aware of the street address and I'm aware of that awareness of the street address at the same time. It seems to me that that is the case. But what would be said in the Abhidharma is that the moment that you aware, that the moment you're aware of the street address and the moment you're aware of your awareness of the street address are different moments, different cheetahs, but they're occurring in such rapid, the one is following the other so rapidly, it seems that I'm aware of my street address and aware that I'm aware of my street address at the same time. But if I were to sort of slow down the functioning of the consciousness, you know, the way they slow down a movie, I would see that at this moment, blip, there's the knowing the street address. Then a little bit later, there's blip, the awareness, or the cheetah that is aware of that cheetah that knew the street address.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, I just thought of something that somebody had showed me some years ago. It was, I think, on YouTube. It shows two basketball, I think like two basketball teams playing basketball, and they give you the challenge, keep your attention focused on the ball as it passes back and forth. And so you're observing the ball, you're watching the ball for a few seconds, maybe like about 10 seconds as it's going back and forth between the two teams. Then they stop, and then the narrator says, were you aware of the gorilla passing across the basketball court? You wonder, what gorilla was he talking about? And then he shows you the video in slow motion. And while the ball is passing back and forth, and while you were focused on the ball, there was a man in the gorilla suit walking across the basketball court, but you were focused on the ball, so you didn't see the man, though he was in plain sight. And you realize when you see that, yeah, that figure with the gorilla outfit, I was sort of aware of it, but I just didn't identify it when I was watching the ball going back and forth. So it was happening sort of.
Sorry, yes, it's like magic. Same thing with magicians, they divert your attention. You don't see what's going on in front of you. Have we got time for a few more? We're coming up to lunchtime, but we just got the mental objects to go through.
Okay.
Does the sense sphere mental object also have a fixed length of mental moments, or fixed number of mental moments, I suppose we should say?
In the case of this, of a sense sphere mind process, let me just see, I just have to review. The Javana phase certainly normally will have 7 Javana moments. Yeah, so it appears in the sense sphere Javana process, there will always be the vibrational bhavanga, the stop bhavanga, mind or adverting, and then 7 javanas. In some cases, there'll be 2 registrations. In some cases, no registration. So in that case, then there would not be the fixed number the way there is. Well, actually, I think the complete mind or process will have a fixed number, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It seems 12.
Thank you, Bhante. Is the independent mind door object dependent on memory?
I guess a lot of the objects that appear in the independent mind door process will be memory objects coming up. But I would say in any process of consciousness, there has to be some memory has to be working in some way, almost as a underlying part of an underlying operating system. Even if I'm thinking in abstract numbers, let's say I'm trying to figure out the square root of 25. Let us say it's a much larger number that I've never encountered before. So I'm trying to figure out the square root of that. That would be mind door processes working. And I would have to be bringing in memory of how to enact the process of finding the square root of a number. So memory would have to be operating. But the fact that I've never gone through the process of determining the square root of this number in the past, I won't be remembering a number that I came across in the past. Whereas with 25, I know from past experience that the square root of that would be 5.
Very good. Thank you, Bhante, because there's another question here which goes directly on the back of it. What is memory? If there's no persistent ego entity to remember, how does memory work? Does it interrupt the Bhavanga as well?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And I have to say, this is, I think it's one of the big gaps in this, especially in the Theravada and Abhidharma. I don't know the other Abhidharma and philosophical systems well enough, but there seems to be not adequate attention or detailed attention given to the question of how memory operates. And some years ago, I remember when I was in Sri Lanka, there was a book compiled by actually an American scholar, Janet Gyatso, called In the Mirror of Memory. There were scholarly papers on the nature of memory according to different schools of Buddhism.
Thank you, Bhante.
And the one from the Theravada Abhidharma perspective tried to explain memory on the basis of the mental factor, sanya, or perception. But I thought it was only partly, it had some interesting observations, but not fully convincing.
Thank you, Bhante. In the Yogacharan system, that's what the alaya does, of course. It provides that memory function. When remembering the walking turkey or the bell sounds that you mentioned, would these objects be considered as concepts or ultimate realities, such as color or sound or something?
Yeah, but in this case, I'm using concept to bring the object to mind, but in the example that I gave, maybe using a turkey was not such a good example because that you rely primarily on the conceptual nature. But let us just say I'm bringing to mind a patch of green. I just looked out the window. I see the green trees, but now what I'm bringing to mind in the purely mind door process is the green color. And so what I'm bringing to mind is that what the color looks like, rather than things that I'm identifying as bearers of that color, the leaves. In that case, it would seem to me that the real object is a memory image of the color, not the color itself.
Yeah.
And similarly with the sound.
Thank you, Bhante. And then finally, does it mean that an obscure object that isn't registered won't create karma?
Well, it isn't the object that creates karma, but it's the volition operating in the Javana phase that creates karma. So it would seem to me that even if the object is obscure, in the Javana phase, the be volition there, and that volition will create karma. But because the object is not so clear, I would say that the karma that's created in that Javana phase will not be as strong as karma that's created when the object is clear. And when the object is clear, then when one takes action in regard to that object, then one knows much more clearly and distinctly what one is doing. Whereas with an unclear object, there'll be a Javana phase in which one can still be forming some karmic volition, but it's relatively weak. And so the impact, the effect will be comparatively weaker.
I think the reason the question was asked was if there's no registration, then where does that karma get stored?
It still leaves its impression. That's sort of like another big question. Where is the karma that's stored? And the Theravada tradition says that there's no place where the karma is stored, literally, but when karma is done, it always remains somehow as that potential to bring about its effect when the appropriate conditions obtain.
So could I ask a personal question there? Then so what does registration mean? I'd understood that to be the registration of the karma in the bhavanga. What's being registered?
No, it's just the impression of the object that's registered.
Oh, I see. There's no karmic potentiality in that term.
No, it's the Javana that creates the karma, and that karma created by the Javana will be stored whether there's registration or not.
I see. Thank you, Bhante. Well, that's got to question 17. There are another 6 to go. Should we stop here? We've run over a bit.
Yeah, I think but keep those questions.
I will, Bhante, yeah.
And then we can take them in the second part of the program.